to him.
Halima, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it, and I'm really excited to deliver this webinar today. So let's jump straight in. So before we actually get into it, just a few requests from my side, just to make sure that I have a great experience. More importantly, you guys have a great experience too. Number one, I'd invite you to be open to new ideas. Some of the concepts that I may be exploring with you guys today will be very new. I'd encourage you to come in with an open mind, because it's an open mind that will allow you to learn and make the most out of this webinar. Number two, I'd humbly request that you get involved. The more interaction you guys have, the more fun this will be. And more importantly, the more we can bounce ideas and perhaps allow you guys to leave with a really firm understanding of how to create a really solid and winning CV. And number three, just have fun, enjoy the process. All of this is meant to be fun. The most difficult part is when we're looking for work and when we're stressing, when we feel like there's a lot of pressure. Let's make this as enjoyable as we can, as well as making this a learning experience. So let's crack on. By the end of this session, you will be able to understand how to present your unique value proposition to employers. If you're wondering what that is, I will explain that shortly. The second objective is to know how to create a winning CV. I will outline the structure, all the main components, and even give you examples based on the CV that I created based on my previous career as well. And finally, it's about learning how to tailor a CV for each role. There's no point having just a document which perhaps acts generically. One of the points that I would really explore is about specificity, and having a CV that is tailored to the role will maximize your chances of getting interviews, which is what this is all about. So just a very little quickly about me. I'm a career coach, as Halima's mentioned, and the founder of MK Career Solutions. And my background was in corporate sales and marketing, particularly in the medical device sector. The reason I want to mention this in particular is because when I'm doing some of the examples, I'm going to use my previous background in medical device sales and use that as an example for everything that we discuss. So hopefully that will allow you guys to see a bit more sense into why certain elements have been positioned the way they have. So before we get into the intricacies, let's go into some common CV mistakes, because I've been fortunate to review and work with clients. And I guess in my time, if I'm being conservative, I've read over 1,500 CVs over the last 5 years. And I've mentioned some and seen some very common themes across the board that makes a good CV and what makes a bad CV. And one of the first mistakes is about writing what you think the employer wants to hear. That might sound counterintuitive when you first hear it, but it's actually very detrimental to do so. If you write a CV, a covering letter, LinkedIn, etc., all based on what you think they want to hear rather than what is authentic to you, it's going to become very obvious that that's the case, and you are more likely to get caught out in the interview setting. Whereas if you make it tailored towards you, it's a lot easier and a lot more impactful as well. Number two, using modern templates that focus on visuals. I'm sure everyone on this webinar has seen an example of this before. Maybe you've seen a CV format where there's large text boxes or a lot of color on there, or maybe ones where there's horizontal and vertical information all over the place. Some of these things might look wonderfully appealing to the human eye, but they actually limit your ability to write information effectively. And more importantly, if some of the information is passed onto an applicant tracking system, which is the common technology commonly used by recruitment individuals, you may find it to be a struggle, or you may find it to be arduous. So try and focus on a more simplistic, simple template rather than one that focuses on visuals. The third mistake that I see most commonly is inconsistencies with spelling and grammar. Now, in this day and age, this is one that's very easy to fix. The most basic of standards that an employer would expect is that spelling is right and grammar is right. That includes capital letters in the right places, full stops consistently, bullet points used appropriately, and of course, spelling as well. You can, of course, use a MS Office spell checker to overcome this, or more sophisticated free tools like Grammarly, which allow a more comprehensive search, which will prevent the likelihood of any grammar or spelling mistakes being present. Just a word of warning with this, though, both Grammarly and Word, even though they have UK-based settings, some of the grammar is technically American, so be careful to avoid that if you are applying for UK-based roles. And the final, most common CV mistake that I see is a lack of specificity. Now, it's a bit of a tongue twister, and I struggle to say that word myself, but what I mean by that is not tailoring a job to a particular role, not tailoring a CV to a particular job or a particular role. The more tailored it is, the more likely you are to get an interview, because it shows attention and it shows a passion and desire for a specific opportunity. And don't get too bogged down on this, because it is actually a lot easier than you may think, and I will go through this later on in this presentation. So these are some of the more common CV mistakes. If you do have any more, feel free to write them down in the chat and we will come back to them later as well. But I'm really interested to hear you guys' thoughts. But let's go on to the core of this now. I mentioned this word earlier, and this is the key to this whole presentation. And this is the key to your job search success. The key to a winning CV is focusing on your strengths and unique value proposition. Your unique value proposition, what is unique about you as the individual, is what's going to set you apart. And why is this important? Well, the reality is there is only one you, regardless of how many people are interviewing for a set position. There's only one of you, and there's definitely some unique things about yourself that other people may not possess. There's only one person who's lived your life, gone to the studies that you have and the experiences that you have and shaped the way that you think. And that should be the key to how you present your information. Remember, companies are looking for a personality, not a robot. If you're applying for a job, that means that they're looking for a human being, not a piece of machinery. And that means there has to be personality behind what you do. Personality comes from you and what is unique about you and what you have to bring. And in most jobs, bar a few extremely technical ones, skills can be learned, but personality cannot. Most jobs, more often than not, it's very likely that the technical skills of the role can be taught as you get into the role. But one thing that's very difficult to teach is the soft skills, the communication, the engagement with other people, working under pressure, managing time, leadership. These sorts of things are a lot more tricky to learn. So when an employer is looking at you and thinking of a particular candidate for a job, especially from your CV, they are thinking about your personality and your profile as a human being, as well as they are your ability to do the job, because your ability to do the job can be trained as you go along. And remember, at this stage in your career, because this is predominantly for early years candidates who are perhaps in the early stage, 1 to 5 years, so it's less about your total experience and more about the potential that you have to offer. An employer be well aware of how much or how little experience you have going into this application process. So they are assessing you based on your capability to do something in the future, not right now. Now, this is important because the more personality, the more passion, the more uniqueness you show, the more likely they are to think, this person has the capability to do exceptionally well, not just when I take them on, but for the next few years as well. Let's move on now. So you might be thinking, how on earth do we get to a point where we know what our value proposition is? And I've got a very simple structure which you can follow. Some of you guys may have seen some of this in my webinars before, but I've tailored this one specifically for writing CVs. You may have been sent a copy of this beforehand. If you don't, you can either get a piece of paper or a Word document and write these 4 things down or make a grid. And you can go with this as we're going along. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a quadrant. It can be in a list form as well. But have these 4 headings ready and try and think about some of these questions as we're going along. If you can populate this, especially throughout this webinar, you will have all of the core information you need to build a winning CV. So let's go through it now because some of these things might seem obtuse. Love, achievements, skills, and patterns of success. Let's start with number 1. Number 1 is love. Now, as we're going along, as we're doing this, I'm going to say some of these questions and feel free to write some things down. And more importantly, if you can, some things that resonate with you, feel free to write them in the chat. It'd be great to hear what you guys have to think. Now, when we think about what we love, think about what work activities do you really enjoy? What tasks or responsibilities fill you with energy? What do you enjoy doing outside of work? What subject areas or industries interest you? And do you have any hobbies and interests? Try and make this quite broad. Try not to think just about work. Try and think about outside of work as well. But focus on things that you love, that when you think about in terms of your role, in terms of your academic career, in terms of your work experience, think about things that you absolutely love. And I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. So feel free to put some in the chat and it'd be great to hear what people have to say.
Also, just to add, I've shared the worksheet in the chat. So if you haven't seen this before, you can download it and use the worksheet to work along while we're doing this session.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Halima. Rusan, thank you for contributing. Rusan says, photography, art, and comedy. These are great things. Wonderful things. Wonderful things. Anyone else with any suggestions? And try and be in your own documents or in your own notes. Try and populate it as much as possible. The more information you have, the easier it will be to build out other elements of your identity quadrant. And more importantly, you'll see. Anna talks about rap music. If that's what you like, then that's what you like. That's excellent. Love for listening. Interesting, I know when you say love for listening. Listening to rap music is really interesting. I wonder if there's any commonalities between what you listen to in rap music, maybe the words or the meaning, and how you translate that into your work setting. I'm really curious to hear about that. The words fascinate you. Interesting. So on your identity quadrant, you may list rap music as one, you may list listening to rap music to another, and you may even list active listening, especially to the words or language is another one. That's a really fascinating one to think about. So hopefully you guys have been able to populate this to a degree. Binu's talked about languages, choirs, and books, all interesting things. Hopefully you've got some things written down there now. Here are some of the things that I've written down for myself. So assuming I'm going down the medical sales route, I've written down, I love selling. I love selling things. My first job was in a retail store, Sports Direct, and I love doing that. I love networking as well and meeting new people. I love being in an environment where I have the freedom to work on my own. Personally, I've had office jobs and I haven't really enjoyed them. But I've also had field-based jobs where I'm out in the field with customers and clients all day. And I've absolutely loved that. So that's something that I've written down. I've also loved teaching ever since a young age. I've always been involved in tutoring, peer assessments at university, voluntary activities. Even now, I volunteer as a mentor at the Prince's Trust. Obviously, I'm doing this today, which is a version of teaching. Teaching is something that I love doing. And things that I've loved from my studies have been anatomy and physiology in sports. And you'll see where that comes into later as well. So these are just some examples. Feel free to populate your list as much as you want. The more ideas you have, the better it will be. And then we're going to move on to the next section, really, which is tasks and skills. So this is where we get a bit more technical now. And you can think outside of work and you can think inside of work, but you can think of academia as well. What tasks do you love doing? What comes effortlessly to you that other people might struggle with when it comes to tasks or responsibilities or skills? What have you often been praised for by your manager, your colleagues, or your friends for doing or exhibiting in the past? And another question is, what would you consider to be some of your biggest strengths? Feel free to give yourself a lot of credit. I know it might be difficult and it might seem a bit overly confident, but this is for you only. Feel free to think about some of these things because this will allow you to really plot some of your key skills and strengths. And to give you some ideas, here's some of the skills that I feel like I've been really strong at. I feel like I'm very goal orientated. If someone gives me a target, if someone gives me a number to hit, if someone gives me an objective that's tangible, I love just getting out there and focusing on there and hitting it. I'd say, as you can probably tell by how much I talk, I'm very people focused as well. I love being in environments when I can be around other people. I absolutely love that. And it's not only about meeting new people, it's about working with them, which is where stakeholder management comes in. I love the idea of working with people from different departments, even different companies or different environments, and bringing them together and working on projects with them. I'd also say I'm a great planner. I'd say I'm very organized, especially in systematizing things. And I love analyzing data on spreadsheets. I've got a secret passion, which is manipulating data on Excel. If anyone ever gives me an Excel spreadsheet with some messy data, I love getting it fixed. That's just something that has really been important to me. I'm really curious to hear from you guys. What sort of skills do you feel like you guys are strong at? I'm really curious to hear that. Feel free to write them in the chat as you have done with your loves as well. Harry says, can you share the skill list of questions for 30 seconds? Yes, of course. I will just move back to that. Here are the questions here. Feel free to have a look at them and feel free to list some things down on the chat as you're going along as well. Looks like we've got a shy crowd. Don't be shy, guys. Feel free to contribute. Binu talks about being deadline driven, goal orientated, a wordsmith and creative. Those are all wonderful ideas. Sophia's talked about being creative, finding solutions, being responsive and being supportive, all amazing things, great ideas, guys. And if someone else writes something that you feel like is relevant to you, feel free to write it down as well. Prajit talks about being courageous to take on tasks regardless of the outcome. What an incredible quality. That's amazing. I'm sure you're going to be a valuable asset to any company. Rusan talks about searching for things and finding solutions, using Google, very wise. That's a great one. The amount of technology and the amount of data we have access to today is great, but there's actually a skill to actually retrieve the right information from that. So I love that one, Rusan. Thank you very much for sharing. These are all wonderful ideas. Feel free to list them. Feel free to list as many as you can. The more of them you have, the better, really. Anna talks about having leadership skills, but she feels like it hasn't always been accepted or cherished. At least you recognize that that's important. And what's really important, I guess, for you in your stage of your career is actually finding an environment or a list or a set of individuals who actually value you for what you do. So this is great. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas, guys. Keep them coming. Jules talks about being goal-focused and solution-driven, very much like me. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Keep them coming and list them as much as you can. So we've got some of the ones that I've said. Now let's move on to the third quadrant, which is about achievements. Now you may think, what does it mean to have an achievement? And there's so many different examples. I'm just going to give you some that you may be able to use. So when you think of something that you've done in work or in university or in voluntary roles, have you ever received any awards? Have you ever done any work that's enabled your company or your organization to achieve an award? Have you ever had a target that you've met and exceeded? Have you ever supported a company, a university, or a voluntary organization's events in terms of organization? Maybe you've worked with a client or a customer who's left exceptional feedback. Can you recall what it is that you did that allowed them to give you that feedback? Have you ever received any promotions in work? Have you ever worked on any projects with a high monetary value? Have you ever been involved in organizing marketing events? Have you ever been nominated to train and support other staff? Have you ever done anything within your company or made a suggestion that's improved how workflows work or systems or processes? Have you ever been involved in mentoring new starters? These are just some of the many, many examples of achievements that you may already have. So I want you to invite yourselves now to, again, look at your identity quadrant and perhaps think of some examples of your own. Here are some examples that I had in the early stages of my career. I was obviously involved in a sales-based role in medical sales, and I exceeded my sales target in the 2019 financial year. In not just this job, but in a previous job as well, I was coaching and mentoring 3 new starters who all passed their probationary period, i.e. they all passed the 6-month or 9-month mark and got full-time secured positions. I mentioned my secret love for Excel. In one of my jobs, I actually created an Excel dashboard, which halved the time it took for the manager to find some of the key information about sales data. So rather than them having to spend maybe 20 minutes messing around with information and then figuring it all out, I created a spreadsheet where all they had to do was copy and paste figures they got on a daily basis, and literally in 10 minutes or less, they were able to get it all sorted out. I also was nominated by my manager to support an event, a company event, which had over 100 plus attendees. It was really hard work, but I'm so proud of myself that I was able to do this. I'm really, really happy. So these are some examples of my achievements. So I want you guys to invite yourselves now to think about what achievements have you had in your career or life as a whole. And again, feel free to write them down and feel free to put them in the chat. I'm just going to move back up to this slide just to give you some more prompts whilst we're doing this. But again, feel free to keep it going in the chat, and I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Any ideas, guys? Would love to hear from you. I often find this is one of the more challenging ones that clients have, is about thinking about achievements, but we've definitely got some coming through. Jules has got wonderful achievements here. Driven profit, won competitive briefs, won numerous industry awards, mentored young people. Spot on. You're going to have plenty of these. Wow. If you haven't already got a raise, you should ask for one. That's for sure. Incredible achievements there. Binu talks about training junior staff on work products and deliverables, winning a team award, appointing on the CIPR council, meeting and exceeding targets, end-to-end management of events. Wow. I want to hire you. Are you looking for a new job? Anna says, should we stick to professional or can we mention personal? Anna, you can mention personal too. It all counts, believe me, it all counts. Wonderful achievements here, guys. These are terrific. These are exactly the kind of things that we're looking for. And if someone else has prompted you to think of something that they've done, maybe you can relate it to the work that you've done as well. But we've got some wonderful individuals here. Your CVs are going to be tipped up by the end of this, that's for sure. So we've talked about achievements, and here's some of the ones I've written. So this is how my identity quadrant is looking at this moment in time. Now we've got one final box to do before we can actually begin working on your CV, and this is called patterns of success. So what we want to do now is find the links between all of the three quadrants and all of the information that you've done so far. This is about connecting the dots. So the achievements that you've written down, how did you deliver on those? What was the process that enabled you to create those accomplishments? If you were to teach someone else how to accomplish those things, how would you describe it? What are the common themes? Are you starting to see some links as you're thinking about this information? So let me just take some examples from the chat because I think they're really, really good so far. So for example, Binu's talked about training junior staff on work products and deliverables. If you had to write down almost a system for how someone else could train junior staff, what would that look like? What was the process that enabled you to do that? Did you go to your manager and did you ask them? Did you have a specific way of training them? Did you use resources like PowerPoint or did you do it manually? You won a team award. How was it? Or what was the process or circumstances that allowed you to win a team award? You were appointed to the CIPR council. Obviously, not everyone has that privilege to do that. What was it about you that enabled you to get nominated? Let's take someone like Jules. Jules has won competitive briefs. What was it about the way you did the brief, or what was your contribution that allowed it to happen? You've won numerous industry awards. That's fantastic, actually, Jules. What was it about the work that you did that allowed you to get the award? You've mentored young people who are now excelling in their careers. What was it about your mentorship that allowed them to excel in their careers? These are wonderful examples, guys. Wonderful. I'm going to stick another slide on, which will really make this clear. What connections can you find between your love, your skills, and your achievements? This is the key to doing the patterns of success. Try and find links between the three of them. And if you can, this is where you really start to build up some traction. So here are my patterns of success. Earlier on, I told you that I exceeded my sales target in 2019. What was my pattern of success that allowed that to happen? I identified high potential, low competition accounts and focused 80% of my time there. I had hundreds of accounts in my books, but trying to spend time with all of them I knew was not going to get me anywhere. What I instead found was accounts that perhaps had been ignored by the company and perhaps hadn't had any involvement by competitive companies, and I spent 80% of my time there. That's what allowed me to exceed my sales target. I was coaching and mentoring 3 new starters. How did that happen? Well, I love teaching and I love helping others. So I asked my manager for the responsibility. Whilst I was in a work position, I thought, let me make the most of this. So that's another pattern of success. And finally, the creating an Excel, a new dashboard. Where did that come from? I think I have a natural ability to analyze and organize data, and I've got really good Excel skills. So the Excel skills and the analysis skills and the organization of data allowed me to create a new dashboard. So hopefully this gives you some ideas of how you can find patterns of success which link the things that you love, the skills that you're good at, and the achievements that you've had in your career. And this is how it should look. Now you're going to start to see some colors, because now what we're going to do is we're going to take this information and we're going to put it into practice into a CV itself. So if you see colors that are linked, that means those points are linked. So selling is linked to exceeding my sales target 2019, is linked to my data analysis skills, and is the pattern of success to be able to analyze data to increase sales. The green one, I love teaching. Because I love teaching, I coached and mentored new starters. That links to my kind of people-focused nature, and how that's resulted in the pattern of success is having a passion for helping others to thrive. And you're going to see where this comes in very shortly as we start to build a CV. So let's get into it now. This is how you structure a CV, and then we're going to use all the information that we've just acquired to actually build a CV together. How to structure a CV. Now, the structure is very, very simple. The top of the CV should have the personal details. Then we should have a professional summary or an executive summary or a personal profile. Then we should have a key skills section, a career history, an education section, and hobbies and interests if space permits. Of course, we only want a maximum 2-page CV. So if hobbies and interests brings the CV onto 3 pages, we do not want to have that on there. So the personal details, these are very simple. We obviously want your name, first name and last name, and a middle name if you have one, or if that's what you go by. For the location, we only need to include the postcode and city and town. There's no need to include your full address. There really isn't any benefit to you or the recruiters for having that information. We want your phone number available as well, an email address, and LinkedIn URL as well, and make sure these are hyperlinked. So whilst someone is reading your CV, if they like what they see and they want to send you an email, one click and they can send you an email. Similarly, if they want to get more information about you, your LinkedIn URL is clearly there and it's present, and you can click on that, and they can click on it and have a look at you as well. So this is how it is. It's not really rocket science. So this is how I presented my information. You can see the name, the city postcode, the phone number, the email, and the LinkedIn there. It's as simple as it goes, and I wouldn't worry about overthinking this one. Let's move on now to the next section, which is the professional summary. Now, you may already have one of these on your CV already, and this is a paragraph anywhere between 5 to 7 lines long. And what you want to do is follow a simple formula to make sure you have all the relevant information. And that is simple. What you want to do is summarize the years of experience you have. You want to make clear the role that you're currently doing and the industry that you're working in. You want to describe maybe 2 or 3 of your key strengths and qualities, which we're going to pull from our identity quadrant. And finally, on the last line, what you want to do is state the role that you're applying for, which makes it seem specific for the role in hand. So this is my identity quadrant. I'm just going to pick out 3 things, and I'm going to include this in my own personal profile. So the 3 things I'm going to pick out is the fact that from my skills, I'm very goal-orientated and I'm very people-focused. And one of the patterns of success that I've exhibited over the course of my career is that I've got a passion for helping others thrive. So I'm going to take 3 of those things and a bit more, and I'm going to put this onto a personal profile section here. So here's how mine would look. People-focused and goal-orientated sales professional offering 5+ years experience in meeting and exceeding sales targets in the field of medical device sales. Possesses a natural ability to build a network and quickly build relationships with new stakeholders. Brings a passion for helping customers and colleagues thrive and is always looking for ways to support others to achieve their goals. Actively seeking new opportunities and what I would do is change the job title based on the role that I'm applying for. So let me break that down for you so that you can see the formula that I mentioned in this section in a lot more detail. Number 1, on my identity quadrant, I took 2 of my skills, people-focused and goal-orientated. So I start the summary by mentioning those 2 skills there. People-focused and goal-orientated sales professional. That also states my profession. Then I mention how many years of experience I have. Now, if you've got 2.5 years, it's better to write 2+ years. If you've got 1.5 years, it's better to write 1+ years, for example. If you've got 3 years, it's write a plus sign. It's always good to write that. Offering 5+ years of experience. So there it is. My years of experience are stated there. I've also mentioned my industry, which is medical device sales. I've also mentioned what I love, which is creating a network and building relationships. So as you can see, I pulled that from the love section of my identity quadrant. And then finally, one pattern of success that I pulled out is brings a passion for helping customers and colleagues thrive, and is always looking for ways to support others, actively seeking new opportunities as a whatever job title I'm applying for. So hopefully, this is a very clear formula that you guys can use as well on how you can create a professional summary. If you struggle to do this yourself, I'll be really honest, you can take the structure that I follow and replace the words and replace the loves and replace the patterns of success with the ones you have. But this formula is equally as potent whatever you do. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. And if you've got any questions about this or any comments, feel free to put them in the chat and we can address them later on. And of course, the final thing I did was make it specific as I've written there. Now let's move on to the next section, which is the key skills, or what people call the key competencies. So this is the next section. And what we're going to do is write some of the main soft skills that occur. Now, why is this important? The key skills section or the key competencies section is there because sometimes the first person who will read your CV is not the hiring manager that's going to recruit you. It might be a recruiter, or it might be a talent acquisition individual within the company that you're applying for. Now, they may not have the technical knowledge or understanding of what your role involves because they may not have done your role before. So what they're going to do is they're going to use the job spec and an internal brief to assess if you have any of the competencies or the skills that they're looking for. So what you want to do is read the job description of the role that you're applying. Maybe read a minimum of 10 for the similar sort of role so that you can get a good idea of what the roles involve. At the bottom of each job spec, it's very likely that there will be a key requirements section. So what I want you to do is for 10 of those jobs, copy and paste those and put it into a Word document. And then you'll start to see some similarities. You'll start to see that if you're looking for 10 different profiles for a particular kind of job, the same sort of key skills or key competencies and requirements will pop up. Take 5 of them, put them onto your Word document, and try and link them to something that you've done. Now, the good place to start is to try and link them to your identity quadrant. So if you've got some skills in your identity quadrant, try and link them to the jobs that you're looking for. So for example, this is my identity quadrant here. And at the bottom, we've got skills, and we've talked about stakeholder management, planning, and spreadsheets. These are skills that are really important for me. Let's put those into some key competencies or key skills on the CV. So stakeholder management is one of them. So for that, I've written, makes people feel at ease by engaging with them on a personal level. I'm an organized person, so I've wrote comfortable working under pressure to organize time and deliver the best results. The software proficiency, I have to mention Microsoft Excel, so IT literate with a high level of competency in MS Excel. And finally, we've talked about communication skills and being a persuasive and influential negotiator. So what I've done is use my identity quadrant, and more importantly, I've linked it to some of the key competencies that are on the job specs for medical sales roles, which I may have been applying for if I was still in the industry. So it's a very simple way of doing that. If you're wondering about what key competencies involve that may be different, looking at all of the CVs that I've read and all of the CVs that I've written for my clients, some of the most common key competencies are things like communication, organization, time management, leadership, team working, analytical skills, problem solving, flexibility, IT proficiency, and stakeholder management. The more of those that you can find on a similar vein, the better, but of course, make them specific to your job itself. Now let's move on to the next section, which is about work history. And these are some very simple guidelines to follow. Work in reverse chronological order, which means putting the most recent roles first. The ones that you're currently doing, put them near the top, and the ones that were done a few years ago or a few months ago, put them last. And always try and lead with achievements and try and quantify them with metrics where possible. Make sure it's present tense for the current roles and make sure it's past tense for previous roles. These are some really simple guidelines to follow. And this is an example that I've done. So again, what I've done is I've extracted information from my identity quadrant. I've taken my achievements and I've put them onto the CV. So you may be able to recall one of my achievements was exceeding my sales quota. I actually wrote the percentage, which was by 110% in 2019. I took the lead in coaching and mentoring new starters with 3 team members successfully passing probation. I've not only talked about coaching and mentoring, I've mentioned how many I've mentored. I created a new Excel dashboard, which reduced data retrieval time by over 50%. Again, there's a metric to describe that, which is really important. And finally, I was nominated to support the management team in organizing a conference with over 100 attendees. I've written a number of attendees as well. Of course, depending on the jobs that you've done, you may not always have metrics, but the more metrics you have, the more tangible and reliable it is. Now, as you can see, this job was in the past, so the responsibilities are all written in past tense. I've tried to make them detailed. I've tried to explain what I did, and I've tried to use power words like coordinated, negotiated, produced, populated, partnered, championed. Starting or leading with a power word increases the impact that your CV can have. Now, if you're struggling for work history in terms of professional roles, bear in mind you can include voluntary roles, societies and organizations, internships, and university projects. And what I mean by that is, even if they were voluntary roles, you can include them as a position and make it sound like a job. You aren't lying, but you are making it sound more credible, and you are going to increase the chances of your employer seeing that you've got transferable skills, even if you haven't got a large amount of professional history. So for example, some of you guys may have heard of Toastmasters. This was something that I did for free, and it was a voluntary role for a public speaking club. And as you can see, I wrote a new section called Additional Experiences, and I wrote it as if it was a job. It's got key achievements and it's got responsibilities. This allows them to see that I have got a wider skill set, not just related to the jobs that I've done. And this may be the difference at some time in the future or in the past, that I've got me a job where other people may have not. Education is very, very simple, and we don't need to spend too much time on this, but just include your degree title, include the university you went to and the dates. If the modules that you did are relevant to the roles that you're applying for, please do include them. And add a thesis title for sure. If you're looking for a technical role, say for example, you're applying for an engineering role and your degree was in engineering, you can even talk about what you did in your thesis. Of course, if you're like me and you were applying for a sales job and your degree was in chemistry, you don't need to include too much about it. But here's an example of one that I've done in the past. My degree was in chemistry at the Manchester Metropolitan University, and those were some of the modules that I've done. And the title was about green synthesis of quinasidone, which is an anti-cancer compound there. I've also done some certificates and certifications. They're not degrees, but they're equally as important. So I've structured them as follows, and you don't need to include as much information about them if you don't want to. But keep it simple, add the technical information only if it's technically relevant, and if it's not, just keep it to the basics there. Hobbies and interests. A very common question that I do get asked is about hobbies and interests. If you do have the space to include them, make them interesting and not generic. So if you played for a football team, for example, talk about how long you played them for. Were you a captain? How many matches you played? Did you go to away days? Did you get involved in anything? I know some people talked about art and photography. If you've been a photographer, how long have you been doing photography? What sort of photography have you been involved in? Have you worked with any clients, whether it's paid or unpaid? Have you got a link to a portfolio that you can include? Make it as interesting as possible. Don't discount it, because you never know what interests the individual who's reading the CV will have. And you may never know if that's something that will motivate them to bring you to an interview. But do not compromise your work history or your key competencies or your personal profile for the sake of putting it in. Focus on those things too, because remember, if there isn't any space, you can always include it on your LinkedIn profile. Now we're going to go on to the final section here, which is about how to tailor a CV. And I've gone through a lot of this information anyway, so I won't take up too much time focusing on this. But the key to tailoring a CV is two sections in particular: personal profile and the key competencies. You don't need to worry about changing the work history too much, but aim for an 80% match to the role in terms of the key requirements for the position. The first part is the personal profile, and there's two things really that you need to change. One of them is very obvious, which I mentioned previously, which is about making specific reference to the job that you're applying for in the summary. This is the easiest and quickest way to give the impression of a tailored CV. And the second thing is about the personal qualities. So hopefully on your identity quadrant, you've got tons of personal qualities on there. You don't need to include and squash all of them into the CV, but try and use the ones that are most relevant to the jobs that you're applying for. So this is a very quick job description that I found when I was preparing this presentation, and you don't need to worry about reading all of it. But bear in mind words that I've highlighted in green. These refer to qualities or personal qualities, dynamic, ability to deliver superb service, entrepreneurial, autonomous. If you feel like you read a job description and some of the qualities that you see on your jobs are aligned to you, make sure to include them. So on your first line of your professional summary, where you've perhaps got two qualities, maybe you can include some of these if you feel like they match with you. And finally, the last section is to tailor the key competencies. I've already talked about this, but just to reinforce, take a minimum of 10. If you're keen, do 20 job descriptions for the roles that you're interested in. Copy and paste them into a Word document. Look through all 10 and highlight the competencies that pop up time and time again. Once you've read at least 10 job descriptions for roles you're looking for, you'll start to see so many commonalities. You'll be like, ah, okay, this is what's important for me to include. And remember, 80% match is what you're looking for. So this is a very simple example, a customer service advisor role that I saw a long time ago when I was preparing a prior presentation. And I've highlighted the key requirements section here. And this is just a zoomed in version of that. So if they're looking for excellent communication skills, make sure you use the words excellent verbal and written communication on your key competencies section. If they talk about customer service, make sure you demonstrate your ability to show exemplary customer service, if that's relevant to you. If it talks about managing their own workload, make sure you mention your ability to work under pressure. If it talks about being PC literate, mention PC literate or IT literate. It really is that easy. It may seem really simple, but it truly is. And if you can at least show some of this tailoring, you are more likely to get called into an interview compared to someone who does not. So in summary, this is where we'll conclude before we're going to go on to some discussions and questions and answers. Don't try and be someone you're not. Don't try and use language that doesn't align to you, or don't try and put in skills that don't. Remember, it's about your potential and it's about being unique. So focus on things that make you stand out compared to other people. Remember, your potential is more important than your current capability. People and employers are going to be looking at you based on what they think you can do in the future, not what you can do now. So don't worry too much about trying to disguise that. Your value proposition is the key to both of those things. The more you show your own value, the more unique you will be, and the more likely you are to get picked. And finally, mold your value proposition around the job, not the other way around. This is why we started with the identity quadrant and then focused on the structure of the CV, because use your identity quadrant to build your CV. Don't just look at jobs and try and squash it all in based on what is not relevant and important to you as well. So thank you very much for your time. If you do need anything, feel free to get in touch with the Inclusive Recruiting team or to get in touch with me personally.